Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with another Bible study. Today we will be getting back into Deuteronomy, but before we do, if you are new here, if you are unfamiliar with what we are doing, you may want to start at the beginning. I have a very unconventional view of the Bible, and I have a very unconventional Bible study going on, and I would hate for you to get lost or to get your feelings hurt. So I always recommend that people start in Genesis, but if you don't want to, or if you're already caught up, we're going to dive into Deuteronomy because we left off in Deuteronomy, and we're going to be in 7 because we left off in 6. Deuteronomy 7 is where we start getting the command to take over the nations, right? And we're going to go through this piece of the text real quick, then we're going to look at geography and see where we're talking about. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess, and he drives out before you many nations, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, 7 nations larger and stronger than you. And when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you to defeat them, then you must devote them to complete destruction. Make no treaty with them and show them no mercy. So, a couple of things to note here. Let's go ahead and pop over to the map. Let's make sure that y'all can actually see the map. Y'all can. All right. So, where we are right now, this is actually not current with where we are right now, but it had all the tribes listed out, and I wanted to have that. Israel currently possesses the land of the Ammonites here and all of Bashan. Right? This entire western part, or like west of the Jordan, up to the mountains, belongs to them. They own part of the plains above the mountains, but part of it they don't. There are more Ammonites over here. The Moabites and the Edomites are down here. They're actually a little bit farther, like take the Moabites a little farther into the Edomite territory here, and then swing the Edomites over a little bit below the Salt Sea. But these other tribes are the ones that we're talking about, right? These are the ones that they are being told, this is your land. The Hittites are here in the south. The Perizzites are to the west of them. The Jebusites, the Amorites, the Girgashites, and the Hivites. This is all in the mountains in the hill country. The Canaanites possess the lowlands. Up to the north, you have Sidonia and Aramea. The Philistines have the area that is now the Gaza Strip, is their ancestral possession. And so, we're going to go back to the size. Let's talk about size. We looked in Exodus at the size of the tribes coming out. We looked in the censuses and the 2 census that we had. And what we have is 600,000 fighting men. And that means that we were looking at roughly 3 to 6 million or 2 to 6 million. And I say about 3 is a reasonable guess. It's probably closer to 5. But 3 million people is a reasonable guess. And they possess this land of the Ammonites and Bashan over here. I don't know if you're aware of it. If you're here, you're aware of it. If you've been following along. But that is a lot of people. That is an enormous amount of people. 600,000 fighting men is an enormous army. And this book says that every single one of the peoples living across the Jordan are larger and stronger in numbers, right? The 7 nations larger and stronger than you. Now, either they are all have more people, or they're all bigger. Now, some of them are bigger. We get told that some of them are bigger, but for the most part, this is talking about population. And so we're looking at, if we say that they are all bigger by 1, right? So we're looking at Israel is 3 million people. Let's say that each one of these has 4 million people. All right, so that's 4 million, 8 million, 16 million, right? And then that's what another 8 is 24 plus 4 is 28. So 28 million people, roughly, roughly 28 million people total in this area over here, in the mountains. It's not impossible. You would need some really advanced farming techniques and things of that nature to be able to sustain that. I mean, there's no refrigeration. Like, they're not preserving food in the way that we do now. Now there's smoking and there's salting and there's making the dairy products that we use. That is the reason we came up with them. But there's no long-term storage of meats and there's no real climate control at all. So feeding that many people is a chore in itself, and that's just assuming that they outnumber them by 1 million per, right? That's a lot of assumptions there. That is a lot of people that you have to displace and destroy completely, right? You're looking at 28 million people is a conservative estimate that they are about to take credit for killing. Just so we're all together in what's going on there right now. They're going to take possession of this land. This will be their land plus some over on this side. They don't ever really take over this land of the Philistines or the Moabites or even really the Edomites. Now, they destroyed Midian. We talked about that before, but that's farther to the south. And Sidonia gets pretty much taken care of, and Aramaea's got its own problems coming up too. But so now, they're told, make no treaty with them, or the Lord has delivered them to you to defeat them. You must devote them to complete destruction. Make no treaty with them and show them no mercy. That's why we talk numbers. We're talking about 3 million people, not even 3 million people, that's 3 million total people, 600 fighting men are to devote to the sword 28 million people. And you can talk about justifications over that, but I will talk about entities over that. We talk about blood sacrifice and how every time I see a blood sacrifice, I know that it's the wrong thing going on. Well, in this particular case, this is going to be an enormous shedding of blood. Like, we don't even have the scope of that, right? Like, you could look at some of our modern travesties can number close to that, right? Stalin's famous winter is well, yeah, communism did it, but besides communism, like, the Nazis didn't reach those numbers, and that's the thing, right? So, do not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons or take their daughters for your sons, because they will turn your sons away from me to serve other gods. And then the anger of the Lord will burn against you, and he will swiftly destroy you. Instead, this is what you are to do to them. Tear down their altars, smash their sacred pillars, cut down their Asherah poles, and burn their idols in fire. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his prized possession out of all the peoples on the face of the earth. Now, I looked up Asherah because, that's what you do when you're doing diligence, right? And so she was a matriarchal god that was worshipped in Israel alongside Yahweh for a long, long time. Like, off and on. Here's what happens, right? They're like, we worship God and God alone. And then they're like, oh, well, we're going to take her into. And then they do. And then for a long time, things are great and prosperous. And then suddenly, there's a bad year. And things start going bad. Or suddenly, this army comes from the north. And then, it's Asherah's fault. Now, that piece of wood has zero power. The only power in these idols are the ones that you invest in them. They can't do anything, right? Worshipping anything made by the hands of man is just dumb because the hands of man made it. Worshipping anything that you can put your hands on is dumb because God made that, just like he made you. So there is no power in worshiping these poles. There's no power in these things, but there is power in what you put your investment into. And what happens is when times get tough, people pare down the things that they find extraneous, right? You take out the luxuries whenever you face a time of need. None of the gods, the various gods that Israel strays away with, can do for them what their God can do, right? So why do they stray? It's a question for you. Like, I'm not even trying to answer that right now. Why do they stray if they know? If there is evidence, and we were given the account that there is evidence, and this is the same generation that will stray. We'll get to that. But, like, this same generation that's about to take possession of this land, that is going to go forward and conquer and all that, they are not going to be faithful in what they're doing. It's astounding to me. It just doesn't. That's humanity, and the fact that God doesn't account for that, right? When people are like, "Well, He did account for that. That's why we have this thing that happened 4,000 years later." And it's like, no, no, no. That's just not. That's just not. Like, that's like saying, "All right, my son did something terrible, so I'm going to punish his grandson when he's born." Like, I mean, no, no. Justice delayed is not justice at all. Instead, this is what, okay. The Lord did not set his affection on you and choose you because you are more numerous than the other peoples, for you were the fewest of all peoples. But because the Lord loved you and kept the oath he swore to your fathers, he brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God who keeps his covenant of loving devotion for 1,000 generations of those who love him and keep his commandments. But those who hate him he repays to their faces with destruction. He will not hesitate to repay to his face the one who hates him. Now that is the nature of God. But we just saw, it's a couple verses back, where God is going to put vengeance upon generations for the sins and the iniquities of the father. And that just doesn't, like, it's inconsistent, right? So keep the commandments and statutes and ordinances that I am giving you to follow this day. If you listen to these ordinances and keep them carefully, the Lord your God will keep his covenant in the loving devotion that he swore to your fathers. He will love you and bless you and multiply you. He will bless the fruit of your womb and the produce of your land, your grain, new wine, and oil, the young of your herds and the lambs of your flocks, in the land that he swore to your fathers to give you. You will be blessed above all peoples. Among you there will be no barren man or woman or livestock. And the Lord will remove from you all sickness. He will not lay upon you any of the terrible diseases you knew in Egypt, but he will inflict them on all who hate you. You must destroy all the peoples the Lord your God will deliver to you. Do not look on them with pity. Do not worship their gods, for that will be a snare to you. And you may say in your heart, these nations are greater than we are. How can we drive them out? But do not be afraid of them. Be sure to remember what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and all Egypt, the great trials that you saw, the signs and wonders, and the mighty hand and outstretched arm by which the Lord your God brought you out. The Lord your God will do the same to all the peoples you now fear. Did y'all catch that? That's some good water right there. So, who saw these signs? These people that I'm talking to right now, y'all saw these signs. But y'all are going to take possession of the land across the Jordan. But y'all saw the signs, but y'all are going to take something consistent there. Something just doesn't add up right there with other testimony that we've been given in the same book. We've gone over the reasons why that is, right? Moreover, the Lord your God will send the hornet against them until even the survivors hiding from you have perished. But do not be terrified by them, for the Lord your God who is among you is a great and awesome God. The Lord your God will drive out these nations before you little by little. You will not be enabled to eliminate them all at once, or the wild animals would multiply around you. But the Lord your God will give them over to you and throw them into great confusion until they are destroyed. He will hand over their kings to you, and you will wipe out their names from under heaven. No one will be able to stand against you. You will annihilate them. I got a question. Suppose you are a fighting force of 600,000 men and you are willing to go and witness God destroy, because that's the promise. God's going to destroy them with fire before him. And this God who just kills 28 million, he can't keep the animals from getting to your crops. It's beyond the capabilities of God. When you didn't have to fight to destroy these 28 million people and take over this enormous section of land in the mountains, you don't have to fight. So you can't take out the lions and keep your flock safe from these animals. So that's why we got to take our time. It's not because we're actually going to have to fight. There are cases, and there is times when the fight belongs to the priests, right? But there are times when these people are fighting with swords, when they are going and destroying people. That's a real thing that we're going to get into. So when they're promised that these people will be driven out before them, God is telling them right here, I'm strong enough to drive out 28 million people, to destroy them utterly and completely. Although I'm asking you to commit yourselves to do it. I'm going to do it without you. And then I'm going to need you to do this, right? Because we got to take it slow. Because if I do it all at once, then I can't keep your flocks from being attacked. I'm just saying that it's a little bit inconsistent. It seems to me that if God is going to drive these people out, he could Sodom and Gomorrah it, right? Israel can stand back on this side of the Jordan and say, hey, bruh, my God said he going to rock your world. And then God says, sulfur, burn that shit to death. Oh, somebody got mad, I cussed. I try not to, but so sulfur everything. And then in a little bit, Israel goes in and takes the possession of the land that the God has destroyed everything and gave them possession of. He could send a plague without any sulfur. And Israel could be like, hey, bro, my God said you in trouble. And then they all die. But that's not what happens. But he tells them, I'm going to go in and I'm going to drive these nations out before you. And then he says it'll be little by little. Because you will not be enabled to eliminate them. Well, if I'm not going to be enabled to eliminate them, I don't need to be, because you're going to do it. God's going to drive them out. The same way that the plague that hit the Israelites was swords and spears. It's the same way God's going to drive out the Hivites and all the rest, right? Is through swords and spears. That's the plague. And the Lord your God will drive out these nations before you little by little, and you will not be enabled to Okay. You must burn up the images of their gods. Do not covet the silver and gold that is on them, or take it for yourselves, or you will be ensnared by it, for it is detestable to the Lord your God. And you must not bring any detestable thing into your house, or you, like it, will be set apart for destruction. You are to utterly detest and abhor it, because it is set apart for destruction. Now, what happens is they give it to the temple, and the temple destroys. Suddenly, gold appears in the temple. Oh, that just came from nowhere. Remember the Lord your God. You must carefully follow every commandment I am giving you today, so that you may live and multiply and enter and possess the land the Lord your God swore to give your fathers. He didn't give it to the fathers, he gave it to the kids. That's one of the problems for me, right? If God tells me he's going to give me land, then I have the expectation that God is going to give me the land, not my grandson, not my great-great-great-great-grandchild. That's not it. That's not the way it works. If God makes a promise to me, he keeps it to me. If he makes a promise to my kids, he keeps it to my kids. But he swore to give it to your fathers for their great... No. That's justification, and we've been over that before. Right? Deuteronomy, like I said before, Deuteronomy is doing what Leviticus did for the priest for the entirety of Israel. It's setting the doctrine for the peoples. This is your history. You will remember this. Oh, so that you may enter and possess the land the Lord swore to give to your fathers. Remember that these 40 years the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness, except for when the Midianites were doing it. And so that he might humble you and test you in order to know what was in your heart and whether or not you would keep his commandments. He humbled you, and in your hunger he gave you manna to eat, which neither you nor your fathers had known, so that you might understand that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Your clothing did not wear out, and your feet did not swell during these 40 years. Now, just for reference in the future, this is the part that gets talked about with man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord, is the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness. So know in your heart that just as a man disciplines his son, so the Lord your God disciplines you. Therefore you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and fearing him. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks and fountains and springs that flow through the valleys and hills, a land of wheat, barley, vines, fig trees, pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land where you will eat food without scarcity, where you will lack nothing, a land whose rocks are iron and whose hills are ready to be mined for copper. When you eat and are satisfied, you are to bless the Lord your God for the good land that he has given you. Be careful not to forgive the Lord your God by failing to keep his commandments and ordinances and statutes, which I am giving you this day. Otherwise, when you eat and are satisfied, when you build fine houses in which to dwell, and when your herds and flocks grow large, and your silver and gold increase, and all that you have is multiplied, then your heart will become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. He led you through the vast and terrifying wilderness with its venomous snakes and scorpions, and gave you a stick to look at so you would get better. We talked about that. A thirsty and waterless land. He brought you water from the rock of flint. He led you in the wilderness with manna that your fathers had not known, in order to humble you and test you, so that in the end he might cause you to prosper. You might say in your heart, the power and strength of my hands have made this wealth for me. Why would they say that? Why would they say that? Why would they say that? I bet Midian could tell you. I bet Egypt could tell you. I bet several other places along the way could tell you. Why they would think that their strength of arms could possibly have provided for them, because the things that were given to them were not by their strength of arms. They left Egypt with the freely given gifts, right? The remnant of things that they took from Egypt were freely given to them. They didn't take that by force. They didn't leave a trail of blood behind them there. I mean, otherwise, Pharaoh would have chased them. And so, you may say in your heart, the power and strength of my hands have made this wealth for me. But remember that it is the Lord who gives you the power to gain wealth, in order to confirm his covenant that he swore to your fathers even to this day. If you ever forget the Lord your God and go after other gods to worship and bow down to them, I testify against you this day, or today, that you will surely perish, like the nations that the Lord has destroyed before you. So you will perish if you do not obey the Lord your God. Hear, O Israel, today you are about to cross the Jordan and go in and dispossess nations greater and stronger than you, with large cities fortified to the heavens. The people are strong and tall, the descendants of the Anakim. You know about them, and you have heard it said, who can stand up to the sons of Anak. But understand that today the Lord your God goes across ahead of you as a consuming fire. He will destroy them and subdue them before you, and you will drive them out and annihilate them swiftly, as the Lord has promised you. When the Lord your God has driven them out before you, do not say in your heart, because of my righteousness, the Lord has brought me in to possess this land. Rather, the Lord is driving out these nations before you because of their wickedness. Also, let's point out this real quick. They were just told it would not be swiftly. It is not because of your righteousness and uprightness of heart that you are going in to possess their land, but it is because of their wickedness that the Lord your God is driving out these nations before you, to keep the promise he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob. Understand then that it is not because of your righteousness that the Lord your God is giving you this good land to possess, for you are a stiff-necked people. This right here goes against the entire exhortation to do good. Because he is saying right here that he is not giving it to them because they do good. And I know that some people are going to be like, oh, well, why would I give a possession to a crack addict and expect that crack addict to do anything with that except get rid of it for crack? Why would I give someone completely irresponsible anything when they have no regret of the irresponsibility? This exhortation to do correctly is beneficial because if you live your life according to the laws of creation, which is contained in these, then you have good things come about. And if you stray from the path, bad things do come about. But this is a contradictory statement, right? I am bringing you into this land and I expect you to live righteously. But it's not because you live righteously that I am going to give it to you. It's contradictory. When he says that I am going to drive these people out for their wickedness, but I know that you're wicked and you're going to do wicked things, and I'm still going to give you this wicked. Like, this is literally giving a crack addict of a stack of hundreds. Right? Hold this money for me. Like, that's what's happening here. You know they're going to be disloyal, and you know that they're going to not do the things that they're called to do. Then why would you do it? So that you can redeem them later? Why are they not redeemed now? You just performed miracles. You just drugged them across the sea. 3 million people in one night crossed the sea. They were led by fire, had miracles performed. Why do they not follow? Because maybe some of the miracles aren't what we were led to believe. Maybe when they left Egypt, it wasn't under peaceful terms. The golden calf. And this proves my point, right? As soon as the back is turned, he knows that it's going to go bad. And you can talk about a redemption arc, but you don't need it. Remember this and never forget how you provoked the Lord your God in the wilderness. From the day you left the land of Egypt until you reached this place, you have been rebelling against the Lord. At Horeb you provoked the Lord, and he was angry enough to destroy you. When I went up the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant that the Lord made with you, I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I ate no bread and drank no water. And then the Lord gave me 2 stone tablets inscribed by the finger of God with the exact words that the Lord spoke out to you out of fire on the mountain on the day of the assembly. And at the end of the 40 days and 40 nights, the Lord gave me the 2 stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant. And the Lord said to me, get up and go down from here at once, for your people, who you brought out of Egypt, have corrupted themselves. How quickly they have turned aside from the way that I commanded them. They have made for themselves a molten image. And the Lord also said to me, I have seen this people, and they are indeed a stiff-necked people. Leave me alone, so that I may destroy them and blot out their name from under heaven. Then I will make you into a nation mightier and greater than they are. And so this is not faith by Moses. Right? This is one of the great contradictions. Why did God not know that they would be unruly? He didn't know. He was surprised. You can make all the arguments and apologies that you want that it was part of the plan. It wasn't. He was surprised. This surprised God. He thought that if he led them out of Egypt, they would willingly follow him. Logical assumption, but that didn't happen. They fought and bitched and moaned and complained the whole way. Obviously, something is not correct about the narrative. Because I'm going to tell you now, if my entire generations have been enslaved, and this dude pops up and he's like, hey, I am one of your people. You are one of my people. My God, our God, is going to pull us out of slavery through the use of these miracles. And we go through the whole list of plagues, right? And then we go and we flee Egypt and we're being led by fire. Like, this pillar of fire is leading us. And I'm not technologically advanced. I don't know what the hell's going on. And so I'm amazed by this. And it leads me where I need to go. Now, you do have the problem that he gets lost and has to turn around and come back. You have that problem. And then he runs into Pharaoh and they have to cross the sea. And so I don't realize that we got lost. I don't realize any of that. I'm this guy just wandering in the wilderness, just been freed from slavery where it was horrible. And so I cross this sea. The water rolls back and there's walls of water that are held back long enough for 3 million people to march 20 miles. We talked in Exodus about how that is a significant feat. That is not something that is done lightly or easily. So you're walking past these walls of water on both sides through the bedrock of the sea. You're led through the desert where this guy hits the rock with a stick and it starts spitting water. Where you're provided with a bread every single day. And that if you catch too much of that bread 5 days out of the week, it rots overnight. But on the 6th day, if you catch too much of it, you're able to eat it on the 7th day, and then it rots the next day. After all of these miracles, how can you not? If it was me, my faith would be unshakable. My faith is unshakable now, and I have seen none of that. But these people have, according to the testimony of this book, in these chapters that we're going through today, you have seen these things, and you are taking possession of the land across the Jordan. Both of those things were said today in the name of God. And so Moses, to get back to where I was before the rant, and so Moses gets the word from the Lord that these are a stiff-necked people. And just like Isaac, Jacob, he gets promised, I will make you into a nation. And he says no, because he's scared. Because he knows that he doesn't have what it takes to take over this land, right? If God wanted him to have this land, him and Aaron could walk in there by themselves. And everybody in the land would be like, oh, bounce. But that ain't what happens. And so I went back down the mountain while it was blazing with fire, with the 2 tablets of the covenant in my hand, and I saw how you had sinned against the Lord your God. You had made for yourselves a molten calf. We talked before about the difficulty of making the calf, right? I'm not going to recover that. That was in Exodus, if you want to check that out. Oh. You had turned aside quickly from the way that the Lord had commanded you. So I took the 2 tablets and threw them out of my hands, shattering them before your eyes. And then I fell down before the Lord for 40 days and 40 nights, as I had done the first time. I did not eat bread or drink water because of all the sin you had committed in doing what was evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. For I was afraid of the anger and wrath of the Lord had directed against you, enough to destroy you. But the Lord listened to me this time as well. It's funny how people can talk God out of things. And the Lord was angry enough with Aaron to destroy him. But at that time I also prayed for Aaron. And I took that sinful thing, the calf you had made, and burned it in the fire. We talked about how hard that is. And then I crushed it and ground it to powder as fine as dust. And we talked about how hard that is. And I cast it into the stream that it came down from the mountain. We talked about how unlikely that is. And you continued to provoke the Lord at Taberah, at Massah, and at Kibroth Hattaavah. And when the Lord sent you out from Kadesh Barnea, he said, Go up and possess the land that I have given you. But you rebelled against the command of the Lord your God, and you neither believed him nor obeyed him. You have been rebelling against the Lord since the day I came to know you. So I fell down before the Lord for 40 days and 40 nights, because the Lord said he would destroy you. And I prayed to the Lord, and I said, O Lord God, do not destroy your people, your inheritance, whom you redeemed through your greatness, and brought out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Overlook the stubbornness of this people and wickedness of their sin. Otherwise, those of the land from which you brought us out will say, because the Lord was not able to bring them into the land he had promised them, and because he hated them, he has brought them out to kill them in the wilderness. But they are your people, your inheritance, whom you brought out by your great power and outstretched arm. And that's where we're going to wrap today up, right? We're going to go ahead and let that wrap because we start a whole new section with the whole new part. Today was dealing mostly with the exhortation to do good, despite the fact that they have done no good. They have seen all of these miracles, all of these wondrous things, and yet somehow they are still unconvinced. Somehow, every step of the way, these people, despite being in the wilderness for 40 years, still do not do the will of God. But they're going to get the possession of the land anyway. There's a lot of good to be found in this book, and there's a lot of not so good to be found in this book. And we're about to be getting, when we get into Joshua and the things that happen there, we're getting into some not so good stuff. These 24 million plus people are not killed by a plague. They don't disappear from the land by a plague. And Israel somehow does not manage to keep the covenant, but they still come into possession of the land. Moses is in part of the promised land now. They have possession of part of the land already. Moses is still alive. They said today in these verses that these people seen these signs, and yet they are taking possession of this land tomorrow. Moses, at the end of this book, goes up a mountain and dies, right? Nobody knows where. All of these things are part of the narrative. All of these things are part of the history that is being set in place. But that does not mean that they are all perfectly accurate. They do not mean that it is a perfect accounting. We have books missing, and there have been things added. When we were given the 10 Commandments, it said to not add anything to the 10. And yet we get all kinds of strictures about what you can eat. That becomes part of the law. That's not the law given by God. God didn't mention shellfish. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a very complicated topic. I know that I have very unconventional beliefs. I know that this study is not for everybody. It is for those who are seeking, those who need a little bit more, who don't quite get it. The narrative as told is not quite right, and it's not. We can see that if you read the book from top to bottom and you look at it without the lens that this has to be because of this. Because Jesus was promised, this had to happen. That's not true. It's not. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. This has been Pit State. Peace.